I was working on my newsletter today, and one of the things that I realized is I have a lot to say on the subject and the concept of mirroring. And one of the ways that I discovered this and it came up was I made a video for a GoFundMe project, and I got all kinds of stirred up about how I looked on the video, and am I attractive, am I articulate, does my face look funny when I say this, and so, here I could have this instant feedback on a very low-tech kind of way of doing things. I set my little flip camera on top of my aquarium and watched what happened as a resulting video. So it gave me an opportunity to get really stirred up, and I went for a long walk, and I was just really working with all these feelings that were coming up and arising and sort of sorting through them as I want to do. And one of the things that emerged was this concept of mirroring and what do people think of me, and engaging with those questions. And I've heard a lot of people, come down on sort of the spiritual side of things of going, it shouldn't matter what people think of you, it's none of my business what other people think about me, and that kind of thing. And I think there's merit to that. I think cultivating an aspect of relationship to yourself and the world that says, I'm not going to be so caught up in how other people are evaluating and judging me, because it can be a really inaccurate mirror. If somebody's really triggered with me, especially if they're disproportionately triggered, then it may not really be good information about myself. The person who's having this bizarre reaction isn't a valuable source of feedback, and if I make myself crazy over whether this person doesn't like me today or that person doesn't like me today, I could be really miserable. There's that concept of, well, you want everybody to like you, but you don't even like everybody, so why do you have this expectation it would be different? And so I think that there's a lot of value in that piece, and I find that people who are so other-focused that they're constantly looking for their reflection in others lose out on a sense of character and integrity, because there's not a sense of who am I when no one's looking, what principles do I live by, what works for me regardless of other people's opinions. I've also seen the pendulum swing really the other way, and this sound piece of work can be applied in the opposite direction to detrimental effects. So I find that people who are not particularly aware overall of the impact of their actions in relationships to other people are really uncomfortable to be around. There's a friend who has somebody that she absolutely adores, but he doesn't seem to take feedback, and so his way of participating is one that I really have to work to stay in grace with. I try not to be too snarky, certainly not in a public professional forum, but sometimes it comes out, and I recently had a date with a fellow who I was rather unkindly calling unemployed manic monologue man, and that was my snarky comment about the date. But on a deeper level, looking at this individual, it was somebody who was very, very bright, very introspective. He'd spent an enormous amount of time thinking about who he was in the world, and on the date he was extremely eager to share his findings and his conclusions about who he was and how he moved through the world, but unavailable to really be on that dynamic experience of saying, well, how am I perceived and experienced by others? He had no capacity to take that in. And for example, I mentioned briefly about the work that I do, and his reaction was to go into a long description and story about experiences he'd had back in his 20s with other spiritual people, and how he felt that there was a lack of health and codependency, which wasn't particularly relevant to the conversation we were having, because we weren't talking about boundaries or expectations about how we treated people. It was really nothing more than, I'm a shamanic practitioner, and he was off to the races, and he was so aware of his own associations, which is good. It's good to know those things, but he had no capacity to take in information. And so I had this experience of just kind of sitting back and watching this person go through this in-depth and intense experience of sharing his view of the world, but he had no way to even acknowledge my feedback. So he was sort of shocked and unhappy when I excused myself from the date and said, well, it doesn't feel like we're a match. And so here are these two extremes. It's not ideal to be so caught up in what other people think of you that your self-esteem fluctuates wildly. You know, today people said something nice, I feel attractive and wonderful and smart and sexy. Today this person didn't like me, or somebody glared at me in line at the grocery store, I feel awful about myself. And I'm saying this sort of flippantly, but I really invite a sense of gentleness when we're having those times, because it feels good when people like and appreciate us and reflect us in ways that we want to be reflected. It especially feels good when it's an area that we feel vulnerable about. So if we don't feel very smart, having someone go, oh wow, that was a really great idea, is going to feel wonderful. If we're not feeling very pretty, having someone go, wow, you're so beautiful in that picture, of course is going to feel wonderful. And the flip side is also true. You know, it never feels good when someone says something negative about us. Oh, I don't much care for this about you, or you did that wrong, or whatever. And then if they happen to hit a spot where we've had a lot of negative self-talk and vulnerability, then it can be really excruciating. So if we're already feeling not pretty, and you know some guy looks us up and down and sneers and walks away, wow, that's gonna sting. Even as we hopefully as a balanced person are looking at it and saying, consider the source. Somebody who would go around treating people with contempt because of whatever is probably not a very attractive person. It's probably not a mirror that has a lot of value. Or, the homeless person on the street who's screaming at you that you're an awful person, you might, have a hard time kind of shaking off that experience. But again, there's a consider the source aspect. So I think there's a lot of value in being kind to yourself when you do find yourself in that place of being perhaps more concerned with other people's opinions than is ideal, but recognizing that if that's happening, what can you do to come back to your center? What are your practices that are really supportive of you for feeling good, for feeling in your center? And what kind of self-care? For me, if I'm exercising, if I'm eating healthy foods, if I'm getting alone time and downtime, if I'm talking to people who I have a lot of love and trust with and getting to cycle that energy, these are all things that just really help me be in my center. And as I've gone through the process of online dating, one of the things I've really recognized about that process is, first of all, it's uncomfortable and vulnerable, and so people can end up not putting themselves out. And I'm choosing online dating as a particular mechanism, but it could also look like not putting yourself out with a business proposal, or not being willing to talk about work that you want to do, or not taking the risk of, going and joining, a sports team that you're really drawn to, or saying hi and expressing attraction for a member of the opposite sex. Whatever aspect of your life really matters to you. And for me, being met in relationship and partnership is something that's really important. And so even though online dating has all of its limitations and flaws, it was something that it was important to me to put myself out there, because it's frankly an easy way to have the opportunity to meet and connect with a lot of people that I wouldn't ordinarily meet. And at the same time, really, really, really vulnerable. It's a crazy mirror to look into and try to have it mean anything about who you are in the world, anything whatsoever. It's super, super, super unkind, because so many people are in their own experience, and you're never going to have the full story. And so what can feel like rejection can be completely impersonal. And so knowing that I was going into something that was going to mirror me in just really bizarre ways, and on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, there were men who were close to declaring, their attraction, and that I must be the one on the basis of having read a profile that I put up and looked at a couple of pictures, and there were people who rejected me on the same basis, and everything in between. And you're filtering through this like every single day. There are new contacts and new connections and new people that, you're going through the process of trying to get enough of a sense of them to decide whether it's a good idea to sit down and have a cup of tea and see how it works out. And so some of the things that I did for myself, knowing that I was going to be looking into a mirror that was, by its definition, by its nature, very distorted, was to call in support. So I made a special point of making extra time to connect with men that I know adore me and think I'm beautiful and attractive, not my lovers, just my friends, but who can really hold that reflection in a strong way. And I made a point of making time to be with my girlfriends and to do fun things. And I made a point of really taking care of my physical health, because I knew that if I was exercising really regularly and meditating and doing my breath work, I'd be more emotionally balanced. So even if I did have a moment that was an ouch, or even if I did go the other direction and get all excited about someone with no basis because I hadn't even met them, that I would be able to bring myself back to center much faster with these practices. And so knowing that can be really helpful in terms of moving through the world. And part of this for me was paying attention to what mirrors I was looking in. So making sure I was looking in mirrors of people who hold me in really high esteem, and making sure I was looking at the mirror that comes to me from my connection to spirit when I'm out in nature, and how the unseen world reflects my soul and reflects my spirit. And being with myself, how was I in right relationship to myself, so that I have that reflection of where do I stand with me. So this concept of mirrors is really complicated. In a lot of my work, I'll work with someone and they'll have a wildly distorted view of themselves, usually to the detrimental. So occasionally I'll get a client who, I'm looking at them and going, wow, it feels like you have a really inflated ego, and but not very often. Usually I'm really celebratory if people feel good about themselves authentically, but I see a lot of people who believe they're bad or stupid or, an idiot or, not pretty, not attractive, and their view is so distorted. I'll see women who carry, a few extra pounds going, no man would be attracted to me. And it's true that there are men out there who have a very narrow standard of physical beauty. It's absolutely true. And those men are not going to be attracted. And there are also men who have an incredibly wide range of their sense of feminine beauty and are trying to fling themselves at the feet of these women and running up against the wall of them going, no, I don't see myself as attractive, so I think you're lying to me if you tell me you're attractive. You're just trying to get me into bed, which ironically enough, one of the indications that a man is attracted to you is if he's trying to get you into bed. So there could be this whole strange thing that can happen in our own minds. And a lot of times when we grow up, we're around people who are working with their own issues. So if you have, parents who are addicts, or parents who have some mental illness, or there was a lot of situational stress, maybe there was a parent who was really ill or a sibling who was really ill, you don't get mirrored appropriately. Growing up with narcissists and is one. I have a friend who had just very narcissistic people, so there was no mirroring. They were all about how is someone mirroring me, and she had a deficit of mirrors and reflections. So when we have people who we grew up with or spent a lot of time with, or partners that we spent a lot of years with who are really distorted mirrors, we can take in that information and it can make it really hard to see ourselves clearly. And so one of the shamanic interventions my guides will often do is they'll go in and they'll break these distorted mirrors. If you've ever seen pictures or been into one of those fun houses at the fair where they have all the mirrors that are rippled in some ways, so you're in one and you're like really tall and skinny, and you're in another and you're really fat, and in this one you look really far away, and there are all these different reflections, and it's kind of a fun thing to go through and go, oh wow, look, I'm seeing myself in all these different ways and having all these different reactions. But life can really be like that. So as you're on your healing journey, while you're in the process of bringing in a community that's really clear and learning to see yourself clearly and learning to see others clearly, it's very easy to get this really distorted view of who we are. So the guides will actually break the distorted mirrors and give someone the gift. Sometimes the shamanic gift that's given is a mirror so that they can see their true beauty. I look at people's souls all the time. It is the coolest job in the whole world. I'm absolutely convinced I have the absolute best job that anyone could ever have. It's amazing. and I get to look at people's souls, and the truth is, I just haven't seen an ugly soul yet. I have seen some souls that are really damaged and hurt and torn up, and I've seen some people who, you know, are participating in appalling ways, people who victimized my clients, and people who are really misdirecting their energy in significant ways to, you know, the detriment of themselves or the detriment of others. But at its core nature, souls are just beautiful. They're really, really extraordinary, beautiful things. And sometimes with the veils of separation and all the different ways that we're mirrored, we lose track of that core truth. One of the ways that when I find myself getting caught up in being concerned about how I'm being perceived or how I'm being mirrored is to do one of the Byron Katie turnarounds. I really like playing with her material, and so one of her turnarounds is to just look at it from the opposite. So instead of seeing how are people looking at me, how are people seeing me, is to start looking at, like, how am I looking at other people? You know, if I'm worried about being seen as pretty or kind or some other attribute, am I seeing that in other people? So when I like to go for a walk, there's a lake, Lake Murray, that's near my house, and I like to walk there because it's beautiful, and I like the Guardian a lot, and there's lots of wildlife, and people tend to just be happy and having a good experience. They're enjoying being out and moving, whether they're riding bikes or running or walking or anything in between. You see happy people with happy dogs, and it's just a neat environment for me. And I was out there the other day, and I just decided to create a sort of a walking meditation for myself of just looking at each man that I passed and really seeing his beauty. And so, of course, there are, you know, the men who are incredibly muscle-bound and you know, running and everything else and look very conventionally beautiful. And then there are the ones who are a whole range of different age ranges, a whole different range of body types. And I just practiced authentically finding the beauty in all of them. And it really reminded me that in terms of the men that I've connected to, you know, sure, there's a whole range of different types of male bodies that I respond to, but I don't really have like a type where I'm attracted to this and nothing else. And that's actually really a blessing, because there's so much more opportunity to enjoy and participate with people that way when I can see beauty in a whole bunch of different forms, and I can be attracted to men who look a lot of different ways. It really, really opens up my options. So wow, what a blessing. You know, one of the things to think about when we have that individual who's like, no, this person must be at least 6'5" and weigh this much and have this color of hair, and, you know, all of that, is how sad for them, because it's a very limiting, the package must look this way. And I'm not making people wrong. You know, there are people who are just, you know, really have specific ideas about who they're attracted to, and the last thing in the world I want is a guy who's, you know, authentically really just attracted to slender women, you know, telling himself the story that he should be more wider in his idea of what he finds attractive, and you know, trying to connect in a way that's inauthentic. I would rather just sort those guys out, and in terms of dating, not in terms of people, but in terms of dating, and play with the guys who are like, yay, women are beautiful, I get to play with women, this woman might get naked, that's so exciting, and who have that genuine enthusiasm and attraction. So I think I'm rambling a little bit at this point. As you can tell, I've spent a lot of time thinking about these questions and looking at these things. But it's a way to create space around something that has a lot of charge. One of my social circles that I most treasure is a group of people who all just go in with the premise that, you know, we're all sexy and attractive and wonderful. And we cycle that ball of energy through flirting and playing and laughing, and the women are mirroring each other's attractiveness to each other, and the men are mirroring the attractiveness of the women, and the women are mirroring the attractiveness of the men, and so there's a lot of flirtation and play and cuddling, and just joy in the richness of the connections. And over 4th of July I had the opportunity to go to a very exclusive party. I was actually really flattered that the person whose apparently invites are a bit hard to come by, and she said, "You can be my +1, I will choose you as the person to take." I was so honored that she picked me. And I thought about it and I went, wow, if I go to that party, it's going to be full of, people who are undoubtedly very conventionally attractive and beautiful, but I'll be in an environment with DJs that have been flown in through all over the world and whatever else. I don't even remember the details. I'm kind of making it up at this point. But I thought about it and I went, wow, I'll be in this crowd of strangers and it'll be noisy and intense, and there are liable to be a lot of people who are participating in a way that would have the potential to stir up what's unhealed about me, that is still that junior high kid that was totally the odd one out, that, was hiding in the library because, it was so overwhelming and difficult to interact with my peers. And, through my school years, I was absolutely never the cool kid. And in my adult life, I often get to feel like the cool kid. But some of that really has to do with being selective and knowing myself and putting myself in situations that bring out the best in me, that I'm authentically enjoy, that what I have to offer and share is what's genuinely wanted and desired. And so the invitation is just to kind of look at how mirrors show up in your life and make sure that you're looking into mirrors that have the integrity to reflect you back well. Part of what works really well sometimes in conventional therapy is you have somebody with no agenda. They can be totally on your side. They're totally on the side of your health and well-being. And so they can mirror you in some really powerful and dynamic ways that are very helpful and very supportive, without the agenda to get you to fix dinner for them or have sex with them if they have that agenda run. This is highly illegal and a very, very bad idea. But in general, you can have some good mirroring, and that's part of the healing magic that happens in therapy. And friends who are really clear, who don't have an agenda, who just love you and care about you and want the best for you. And then learning to filter people who are just really caught up in their own stuff, and how they're reflecting you doesn't really have much to say about you. And then at the same time, taking in the mirrors of saying, wow, a lot of people have reflected the same thing back at me. Maybe it's something I should take a look at. It was painful but really valuable for me as an engineer, when I was doing, because I had decided I was going to be an engineer about the time I was in junior high. So I was going away to engineering camp, and I was taking, summer school classes, and then I interned and I did all these things. So through high school and into college and into my first job, I had all these experiences of relentlessly being the overachieving, okay, I'm on this project with you guys, and here's how we're going to do it, and this is what's going to make us win, and I know the answer, and let's do it. And I was so relentless and forceful in my personality that I ran over the top of the team, and eventually they gave up because it was a lot less work to just do it my way and endure the situation so that they could move on to something else, which I realized in retrospect I didn't know at the time. At the time I was just working really earnestly hard to do a good job. And so having these experiences of having accomplished the project and gotten an A on it, and then having nobody want to talk to me at the end, eventually I went, I've had this with a lot of different people. I don't think it's them. I think it's me. And it was really valuable because I started learning how to listen better and how to team with people and how to be co-creative. My intelligence totally outran my social skills. I was slow on the uptake when it came to social skills, and I learned some of them rather painstakingly. I was pretty energetically overwhelmed as a kid, so at the time that other people were working out the dynamics of social skills, I was, you can imagine just if white noise was turned up to a really high volume, all the streams of information about people's thoughts and feelings and everything else, I had no way to filter them, so I was just swamped with input all the time. And the subtle social cues, therefore, I didn't have any bandwidth to take them in. So it meant I had to, grow up, get some shields, get some, situations I felt more comfortable in. And once I had that taken care of, I could start learning about how to interface with other people. So it meant that I was coming kind of late to the game in terms of being able to relate to other people. And at the same time, what's awesome as I get ready to kick off my relationship class is the resulting experience gave me a lot of ability to break down how to relate to other people and what you can do if those are skills that you're needing to learn, because I had to learn them for myself. So anyway, I hope this has had value for you. I'm mostly just giving myself an opportunity to practice working with the recorder, since I'm very self-conscious about it, and it's an opportunity to share in another way. If this kind of material does have value for you, it's representative of the kind of thing that I will be talking about in my relationship class. If you're getting this much later after the kickoff of that, I do create recordings and MP3s of the classes, so there's the opportunity to engage with that material. And in any case, I hope that you found value in this. Thanks so much for your time.